Here's an idea. Let's go on a road trip. So Molly and I are on vacation. We're taking a road trip. We're gonna go to Nashville and we're stopping in Louisville along the way and then coming back through Philly. And I thought that this would be a really good excuse to not only get out from the record corner. There's not a lot around here. Really out from the record corner, but to also talk about the road trip as an idea. The first known road trip happened in Germany when Bertha Benz, the wife of Karl Benz, the founder of Benz Motorwagen, took her husband's then experimental automobile for a 66-mile drive in a suspected publicity stunt. But since then, I think it's fair to say that the road trip has developed strong associations with America and American culture. Which is not to say that people in other countries don't go on road trips or that road trips are uniquely American, only that for lots of people, the association between America and road trips is a strong one. And I want to talk about that for a little while because I think it also is related to the difference between going on a road trip and just driving for a while.
Getting there is half the fun, come share it with me.
There are easy answers as to why that might be. America is big. Some might say too big. Gas prices are relatively low, the terrain is amenable to car travel, but there's more to it than that, both historically and metaphysically. In our SAT episode, we talked about the idea that education would make the country a better place, and this idea cropped up when proud Americans were confronted with the eventuality that progress in America would stop because for 200 years, progress had been synonymous with the Western frontier, and by the mid-20th century, the West Coast was definitely a thing. For a while, though, progress and mobility were peas in a pod, and mobility has always been a subtext of America's favorite societal bulwark, freedom. It's upon striking out, forging ahead, hitting the trail, that our popular historical narrative is built. And to a certain degree, that nebulous concept of the American dream, which I'm pretty sure involves hamburgers. Great, thank you so much. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that America's idea of its own awesomeness is very much built on metaphors having to do with movement. Relatedly, I might theorize that American exceptionalism and the emphasis that we place on the capability of the individual are very much tied up in our love of the automobile. Of course, it hasn't always been that way. There were no Camaros at the Battle of Bunker Hill, and as far as I know, Babe was not the nickname Paul Bunyan gave to his bright blue Buick. The automobile and American citizens have carpooled since probably about the 1950s when President Ike Eisenhower, inspired by the awesome system of roads he saw in Germany, authorized the construction of a country-wide highway system for moving troops and cargo and supplies around the country. And I mean, yeah, sure, great, but seeing military vehicles on a highway remains a relatively rare sight. Far and away, Eisenhower's highway system, which wasn't completed until the 80s, had its greatest impact on civilians. At the end of World War II, when rationing ended, car ownership skyrocketed, and nearly 1 in 6 Americans worked in the automotive industry. Cars and the roads that made them useful became nearly synonymous with American culture. The rise in car culture coincided with the growth of the middle class, suburbia, fast food, American consumerism, the most recognizable byproduct of which being the shopping mall, cross-country distribution. To say that modern America was built both by and for the car would not be an insane overstatement. This also almost definitely gave rise to that most popular of common quips, you know, the best way to see America is in a car.
Riding along in my automobile.
And as resistant as I normally am to what is frequently misnamed common knowledge, I think I agree, with requisite self-consciousness about the fact that yes, the best way to see America does involve a seat and a widescreen viewing experience. The reason I agree is that beyond freedom and individualism, which are absent for obvious reasons on planes, trains, and buses, when you're in a car or on a motorcycle, there's this kind of intimacy with your surroundings that even when you're on the highway, to a certain degree, you're taken through places and not around them. There's always a suggestion that you might stop, you can stop, you may as well stop. Maybe not for long, or if you're in an RV, maybe indefinitely. Either way, one is constantly in transition, but also somehow present, always passing through. A phrase which is itself a cliche found in countless renderings of America's frontier spirit. You from around here? Nope, just passing through. A phrase which means both itself and its opposite. When someone stops on a road trip, they're also always just passing through.
No, just riding through.
This is what I think makes a drive a road trip. Because a road trip is really kind of a paradox not unlike Socrates. Which grain of sand turns a pile into a heap? Which mile marker turns a drive into a road trip? In reality, it's neither a single grain nor a single mile that makes either, but still, some boundary needs to be crossed. We could agree that it becomes a road trip at the first 500 miles, the second time you refill your gas tank, the third on-the-road meal, the first roadside attraction. But for my mileage, I think it becomes a road trip if there are places you are just passing through. Passing through does have its own purposefully unclear boundary, but maybe by looking at the stories that portray it, we can develop a sense of it. Things like Easy Rider, Thelma and Louise, On the Road, Grapes of Wrath, Fear and Loathing, Rain Man, even Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica could be considered galactic road movies, with attitudes smacking of the American frontier spirit or early to mid-century nomadic struggle, respectively. But most importantly, some sense of passing through, and in the process probably learning something about the world or your surroundings and maybe even yourself, which is cheesy, I know, but it's true. Bertha Benz, on that first road trip, she passed through. She passed through several towns in the German countryside to refuel, to have repairs done. So passing through, like the road trip, is of course not uniquely American, but maybe characteristically American? At the very least, something enabled, if not encouraged, by American infrastructure. Now, if you'll excuse me, while passing through Somerset, Pennsylvania, we decided to stop for some hamburgers. So, in the meantime, while we are doing our roadside business, what do you guys think? Road trip defined by passing through? In any way characteristically American? And if so, how? Let me know in the comments. Comment responses from the road. Let's see what you guys had to say about Thor and names. Don't worry, the car is parked. So first things first, I just want to say a huge thank you to my girlfriend Molly, who helped shoot the road trip episode that you just watched. I didn't really do anything other than talk during the entirety of the filming. She dealt with all of the camera and script stuff and making sure that I was making sense, and it would not have been possible without her in the passenger seat. So I just want to say thank you so much to Molly. She's such a good sport. And just a couple more news items before we get on to comments. I'm going to be at the Phoenix Comicon upcoming at the end of this month. We're going to be doing a panel and an office hours. I'm going to be at VidCon this year again, and I'm going to be giving one of the talks at Camp Imgur, which I'm super excited about. So information on the when and where and what of all of those things in the doobly-doo. If you're going to be there, come say hi. Let's be friends. Okay, now on to comments. CodyDog03170 makes the very good point that Thor is not now a woman is now Thor. Very good point. Thank you for correcting me. ToastNinja talks about how their name, Hadrian, is a relatively rare one and that they would be very excited to meet someone with that name, but then also goes on to talk about how they were surprised the Doctor didn't come up in this conversation, and wouldn't you know it, on the printouts that I have of the research for this episode, I have scrawled so many notes about the Doctor, saying like, oh, maybe Thor is more like the Doctor, with like a taxonomy of all of the different characters that you could say are related. But yes, I just want to say I totally agree that the Doctor is very very, very much a part of this conversation, and I think becomes even more interesting when you start talking about the real names of the actors that have portrayed the Doctor over time and how their names relate to the grander idea and title, or whatever you want to call it, of Doctor. McDaioh, whose name I'm probably butchering, so I apologize, talks about how since Thor has no alternate identity, it becomes more difficult to say that another character becomes Thor than is the case with most other superheroes, since he just is Thor, and that this is one of the things that the current arc has narratively had a hard time justifying, and that it might have been just more interesting or worked better if it was done with magic, if Thor just magically turned into a woman for some reason. And I think that this is one of the criticisms of the new Thor that I can appreciate. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see where it comes from, and it's a really great point. I think it maybe just comes down to taste. But yeah, great point, and thank you, McDaioh, for writing this. Daniel Ray asks whether or not there is anger about the new Thor because Thor is portrayed as unworthy, and makes the point that a lot of times when there is a character transition, it's because of a death and not necessarily because that character is no longer able or worthy to be themselves. And I don't actually know enough about the full kind of Marvel or other universe continuity and mythology to say for sure that this is a unique thing, but I would be curious to know if anybody out there has something to throw at this idea that it's rare for a character to become unworthy of themselves or their own powers. Muffin Jr., I have had this experience several times over. I have a good friend whose name is James, but I call him Jim because that's how I met him, and I am having such a hard time transitioning. It's because to me, he is Jim through and through. Jim, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. I totally understand why you want to do it. I'm just bad at it. What I'm saying is that I'm a bad friend, and I'm sorry. I owe you a scotch. DJ Fiven and OfficiallyErling talk a little bit around this idea of having a kind of pride in having a unique name and wondering sort of why you feel a certain way towards hearing about someone else that has your name that's unique. And this is something that I actually think a lot of people experience even if they don't have unique names. My first name is not unique, but my last name is rather unique. There are other micrognettas, like I said in the episode, there's a bunch, but someone a couple years ago when I was starting to make YouTube videos with Know Your Meme, they were like, hey, you should change your name because your last name is weird, it's hard to spell, it sounds bad, and it's going to be a stumbling block for you getting famous, which is a whole other, like, whatever, who cares? I'm not interested in being famous, but I took great insult to that. I was just aghast that they would recommend that I change my name because it sounded bad, and I never did, because that's just not me. I'm Micrognetta. Me and 5 other guys. MrSups writes a really awesome comment that gets into some of the history of the continuity and talks about Thor having his name stripped of him in the past, which is stuff that I didn't know about, so links to this comment and all of the others in the doobly-doo. JakEnglish, about a 7.5-minute YouTube video, it turns out. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these motorists. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit. Links in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from Matt Blind, who points us towards Type Drummer, which is a thing that is surprisingly fun. I hope you're on a lunch break right now, or you just have some free minutes. Clear your schedule for the rest of the afternoon, or at the very least the next 20 minutes.